NBC's Julie Sirkin is reporting on Capitol Hill. Also with us, Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times and an MSNBC political analyst. Sarah Matthews is former Trump White House deputy press secretary. Welcome all. So, Julie, what's the latest on this fight over the report and what obviously could be a messy confirmation fight for Matt Gaetz? Okay, so we lost Julie. We're going to get back to her with the outline of it. And Peter, maybe you can pick up on some of that. But there's a new article you wrote about the choice of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, saying it's an example of Trump wasting little time taking on governmental institutions that frustrated many of his political ambitions during the first term. So tell us more about that.
Right, exactly. If you go back to those 4 years when Trump was in office, the three areas of government that most frustrated him were the Pentagon, the Justice Department, and the intelligence agencies. The intelligence agencies insisted that Russia intervened in the 2016 election. Trump tried to deny that. The Pentagon, the president refused, or at least resisted, the idea of being used to go into the streets after George Floyd and be used against protesters, violent protesters, and even talk of being used against domestic political opponents. And of course, the Justice Department in the end refused to go along with Trump's effort to overturn the election by saying that there were problems with the election when there weren't. And these areas now are the focus of the president-elect as he comes in. And who has he put in place in these three areas? Matt Gaetz, who agrees with him on the election of 2020, who agrees with him about the deep state, quote, quote, agrees with him about the Justice Department being corrupt. And in fact, he said he wants to even abolish the FBI and the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives Bureau. And who is he put in the intelligence agency? Tulsi Gabbard, who often echoes Russian arguments when it comes to issues like Ukraine and has been a skeptic of the intelligence agencies herself. And at the Pentagon, of course, Pete Hegseth, the Fox News commentator, who has defended a war criminal and also talked about purging generals who are not loyal to the president.
So that's the big picture. Julie, give us the immediate picture. What's the latest on this fight over the report and what could be obviously a difficult confirmation fight for Matt Gaetz?
Yeah, Chris, it will be a very steep climb, in the words of one Senate Republican, to get that Republican's vote and many others. This person predicted that there are more than 10 Republicans who would vote against him. At this stage, you and I both know when the rubber hits the road and when the calls come from President-elect Trump, things might get a little bit different. But I did hear from House Speaker Mike Johnson, who said today, after his trip to Mar-a-Lago last night, after presumably he spoke with President-elect Trump, that he changed his tune, perhaps, now weighing in on whether the House Ethics Committee should or shouldn't release that report. Listen.
I do not. No, I think it's a terrible breach of protocol and tradition and the spirit of the rule. The rules of the House have always been that a former member is beyond the jurisdiction of the Ethics Committee, and so I don't think that's relevant.
Johnson putting his thumb on the scale there. However, as you played in your intro, Chris, Senate Republicans want that information. I spoke to sources who believe that they will get it one way or another. There's, of course, an FBI background check that is supposed to be conducted for a nominee of this caliber to lead an agency as vast and big and important as the Department of Justice. But it is very safe to say Johnson putting his finger on the scale, at least at this moment, saying that he will communicate with the chairman of that panel not to release the report. However, there is precedent, historical precedent, of at least 2 times where a former member did have an ethics report released on them. But Senate Republicans want more information, and it will be a very uphill battle for Gaetz.
Sarah, as you well know, Donald Trump has never been shy about throwing bombs, but this one seems to have detonated. So as somebody who's been inside Trump world, help us to understand what the conversations might be, what the strategy might be to deal with this level of pushback.
I think that right now, all of the pushback that they're seeing from choosing Matt Gaetz as Attorney General is probably making Donald Trump even more sure that this is who he wants for this job, because he doesn't want someone who's going to please the establishment. He wants someone who's going to be a loyalist and who's going to do his bidding at the Department of Justice. He doesn't want an independent DOJ. And so that's very clear with this selection. And I do think, though, it's really telling, though, that if I were Matt Gaetz, I would probably want a report out there that would absolve me from any wrongdoing. But the fact that they're fighting this so hard, that you have the Speaker of the House weighing in, which I would note, I believe is a breach of protocol. He likes to talk about that when he said that we shouldn't be releasing a report about a former member of Congress. But I believe that the Ethics Committee and the Speaker's office should be completely separate. And so the fact that he's weighing in now after saying just a couple days ago that he shouldn't be a part of any of those discussions is very telling. I think that he's getting those marching orders from Mar-a-Lago. They know that this would be damaging for their nominee, and this is who Donald Trump wants in this position. And so I think they're going to do anything they can, whether that's trying to do a recess appointment or trying to make sure that this report doesn't see the light of day.
Well, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Sarah, has a theory. We've heard this a little bit from some other folks as well about Trump's strategy, and was talking about just generally Trump's picks overall. Let me play that.
What do you make of the choices so far?
I think the choices are very good except one. Look, Gaetz won't get confirmed. Everybody knows that.
You say Gaetz will not be confirmed. No. Why bother with the nomination then?
You can talk to the president, but it's a good. It's
How
a good,
are you reading
It's a good deflection from others, but it also gives. I'll let it stand with that.
So if you have multiple controversial nominees, could this be a deflection? Again, based on the time you spent with Donald Trump and in his orbit, is that the kind of strategizing you think he might do?
I think it's kind of hilarious, all this discourse out there about, oh, Donald Trump is playing 4D chess. He's putting up a crazy nominee knowing that it will fail. So that way, then he can put up his second choice and the Senate will have no choice but to confirm them. That's not what's happening. He knows that he is drunk on power right now because he feels like he was given a mandate by winning the popular vote. He has control of both chambers of Congress, and he doesn't have to worry about running for re-election. So in this term, he wants to put up the people that he wants. OK, so it is not some 4D game of chess that he's playing of trying to put out a sacrificial lamb like a Matt Gaetz for AG. And so that way his other nominees can squeak through. I don't think that's what's happening. I think he genuinely wants Matt Gaetz in this role, and he's going to try to do everything he can. But I think that some of these senators might not go for it. I don't think we're going to see them push back on some of the other more controversial nominees like a Tulsi Gabbard at ODNI or RFK Jr. at HHS as forcefully as I think they'll push back on Matt Gaetz as AG. I think that if they're going to reserve their political capital and if they're going to tank one nomination, it's probably this one for AG.